Welcome to the Dear Higher Self podcast. My name is Lauren.
And I'm Gina.
And we are super excited to be here for our very first episode. Technical problems aside, technology problems aside, this is a place for you to tune in to raise your energetic frequency during this lifetime, during your soul's expansion. And we're super excited to have you here. So we wanted to take the first few minutes just to talk a little bit about our intention behind why we're doing this and what this podcast will be all about so that you know what you're getting yourself into here. But Gina and I both are on spiritual growth, personal development journeys. And we wanted to create a space where we could not only geek out about these topics ourselves and talk about things that we're both just obsessed with learning and teaching, but also creating a community for like-minded people just like you. So our goal with the Dear Higher Self podcast is to help you, learn different tools, different resources around all sorts of topics, which we'll get into in a second, but more so really to build a community of like-minded people. So creating a space for you, no matter where you're at on your healing journey, on your spiritual journey, to connect with other people, to find like-minded people in your corner, and to really continue to build a space around this. So some of the topics that we plan to cover are going to be things around spirituality, personal development, energy work, manifesting, law of attraction, your intuition, how to actually access your intuition, what that feels like, how to do that, how to discern your intuition from fear or from emotional wounding. We have talked about coming out of the witch closet or coming out of the psychic closet, right? So exploring these different identities and these different ways of being and how to move through that and how to kind of shift into these different different facets of your life. What else are we going to be talking about? What am I missing?
You got all the topics. I think only this is all about combining all these different modalities and these different teachings to help you be your most authentic self, how to embody being your higher self, and how you can use that as you're going through life and what I like to call earth school. We're here as souls in a body, figuring out what it's like to be here on earth and what that means for each of us individually. And so by talking about all these different modalities and teachings will help you on your journey as you come back home to yourself. So it's all kind of under the umbrella of strengthening your connection to your higher self and following your intuition.
Love it. Love it. And I know our intention for this episode is just to, kind of share more with you guys about like why we're doing this, what we're putting out there, but also to talk about friendship and to talk about authentic friendship and ways to really call that in as we want to be building this community and, creating this space for you. That's obviously like the big why behind why we're doing this. So we'll talk about that, but especially tying your intuition into relationships and into friendships, like how to actually help find people who align with who you're becoming, with the higher version of you, and using those relationships as mirrors to continue to grow and to continue to evolve. So yeah, I know Gina and I have a really interesting story about the way that we met, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was it? A year and a half ago, Lauren and I met at a breathwork event, an event that we each went to by ourselves. And I know for me, the reason I went by myself is because I really didn't have friendships at the time that were into these kinds of things. I mean, being on your self-development journey and getting into spirituality, it's deep. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's not so fun to do it by yourself. It's so much better when you have people along the journey with you who get it, who are doing the deep inner work with you. And so it was really exciting to have met you at that breathwork event. Lauren was a little more outgoing than I was at the time. I was still kind of in my like introvert era. And so grateful for you to have been so engaging in conversation, and we really hit it off. And then after the event, Lauren had asked me to coffee, and I remember sitting in my car after and being like, oh my gosh, like, is this how you make friends as an adult? Like, I have a friend date. I just got asked out on a friend date. And I guess I hadn't witnessed anything like that before, and it was so expansive that night to be like, wow, it could really be that easy to meet new friends. And I feel like I hear all the time in the community that we've created locally here in Arizona so far. So often when I meet people, they say how difficult it is to make friends as adults. And I really used to believe that until honestly I met you. That was such an expanding night to be like, wow, it can really be that easy. And I think, we're all kind of a little scared on the other side to put ourselves out there and to be seen, but it really can be as easy as just, hey, do you want to go grab some, well, we got sushi. I was going to say coffee, but whatever it may be, whatever
We
your
did
jam
get
is.
sushi. Yeah. I don't think I asked you to get sushi though that first night. That would have been weird. Like, do you want to go get
Yeah.
sushi with
I
me
think it was a
sometime?
coffee date turned sushi date, but yeah.
That's okay. They're both equally as great, but yeah, that would have been funny if I just straight up, do you want to get sushi with me? Yes. That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like it's similar in the fact that there's been so many times in the last few years of my life, I feel like since I've really been on this journey of like spiritual growth and spirituality, where I often am doing these things by myself. And there's a lot of people who are in similar boats, but you don't know that unless you actually talk and actually like ask
Mhm.
people and kind of put yourself out there. And a few years ago that would have been like terrifying for me, but
Yeah.
it's gotten so much easier, and it's just like a muscle you work with time, right?
Yes.
Like the more you do it, and you can start small, like maybe you don't go up to someone and ask them if they want to go get coffee, but even just like commenting on something or acknowledging them or giving them a compliment, right? Just like pushing yourself by little, especially if you do
Mhm.
identify as more of an introvert. It's like super scary sometimes to even just go to these events, right? Like
Yeah.
just to say yes to that. What I love about that story, though, is that you had shared with me how, your intuition was telling you to go to this breathwork event for, one reason. Like you thought you were going for one thing, but then you ended up finding all of these other things, mainly like friendship and this like expansiveness in you of, oh, this is like actually how I can meet people versus like I'm going to this breathwork event for breathwork, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love talking about this because intuition can be so sneaky in that sense to where you're like, oh, yeah, I want to go to this event. And you feel lit up by it and you get that ping to be like, oh, yeah, I want to go. And then your logical mind will kick in and be like, okay, we want to go because breathwork sounds fun or we're into this. I wonder like what'll come up. But it's like you don't really know why you're being led towards something. You can only guess with your logical mind, like the reasoning behind why it feels like a full body yes to you. And so, having gone to that event, I mean, the breathwork event was great in and of itself, but what I really got out of that, what was most impactful, was the friendship that we got out of it. And it's like you can't plan for that. You have no idea that that's even coming, and that's what makes trusting your intuition and following it blindly so magical, because you never know what you're actually going to get out of it, who you're going to meet, or just what could happen.
Yeah. And it's something that I feel like you recognize down the road after the fact. You'll
Yeah.
start to see why it made sense and like why you were supposed to meet that person or why you were supposed to go to that place. And I just love that part of it, being able to like look back and see, like connect all of the dots of like, oh, this is why I had to do this so that I could meet this person and then learn this about myself or figure this out or try this new thing or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it so fun and magical. It's like there's like a surprise waiting for you and you don't know what it is when you start getting into this world of being like, okay, I'm just going to follow my intuition and see where it leads. I think for some
Mm-hmm.
people that's scary and it's like, oh gosh, like the unknown, I'm such a control freak. I mean, I'm an recovering type A overachieving people pleaser. So
Really?
that yeah. So that was me for the longest time to be like, nope, I need to know exactly what I'm getting into and like every way this could go wrong and my out in all the different directions. But it's been so fun to be on this journey of just being like, ooh, this is exciting. What am I going to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's never bad. Like even if things like do go in like an undesirable way, it's always like in your highest good at the end of it. And once you get through it, you're like, oh, I could see why that had to happen, and I'm a better person for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, no matter what, I'm like, ooh, what? I don't know why I'm getting pulled toward this, but it must be for a reason.
Yeah. I know. I love your attitude on that because I do feel like you're very grounded in that. Like you really embody that in your day to day where it's like something will be happening in your life and you're like, I don't really understand why it's this difficult, or I don't understand why I'm feeling this stuck or whatever. But it's like there's that part of you that kicks in, and you like verbally tell me this all the time where you're like, but, I know it's for a reason. Like, I know it's all working out for me. And I just think like having a friend like that in my life has been so helpful for me because it's like, okay, phew, like I know that that's the case, but I think I just forget it in real life, right? Like when you're in the
Mm,
middle of a problem and you're like, holy shit, like how do I get myself to that space? I mean, I think that's something with having aligned friendships, right? And aligned
yes.
relationships is that people do mirror this back to you. So it's like these truths that deep down, to be true, but they can be so hard sometimes to actually like embody and apply in the moment when you're in the
Oh
middle of
yeah.
something challenging, right? So
Mm-hmm.
having people around you that can mirror that back to you and that can remind you of your own truth, it's like the most powerful thing. But I think what happens is so often we develop these friendships from, childhood, school, college, your first few jobs, right? And they're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily like aligned friendships in the sense of like, oh, I'm intentionally like putting myself out there in a certain way and I'm attracting people back to me who are kind of at the
Yeah.
same energetic level. Like, I don't know. And that's kind of opens up a whole different thing, right? Because you're always attracting people.
Yeah. I was thinking that too.
So,
I'm like, but the universe will put exactly who you need, even if
hmm,
it is through work. But I do
tricky,
think,
tricky.
I do think though that when you are being intentional about who
Hmm.
you are and where you're being guided, it allows the opportunity for more of those aligned friendships to come in because there's only so many
Yeah.
people that are going to get hired at your work or who are going to be in your class, depending on what age you are. So when you are doing these things and putting yourself out there, when it comes to what lights you up, like going to a breathwork class or whatever kind of event is going on, you allow more of those aligned friendships to come in. And like we were saying before, as you're navigating all this, it's helpful to have those mirrors because you could know all this stuff inherently, but to see it modeled back to you and to see somebody else embodying those truths, it
Hmm.
helps encourage you and ground you to be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. That's the mission. Like I need to see
Right.
that right now because I can't see it in myself. And like, thank you for the reminder for being that and being able to just constantly mirror back what it is that we're all trying to do and where we're going and trying to be in alignment and how to
Hmm.
stay in that because there's so much noise going on and there's all these distractions in the world and not everybody is on this path. And I think it's so easy to get distracted from what you want to be intentional about and the kind of life that you're trying to create and the kind of person that you're trying to be. It's kind of like if you're, trying to eat healthy so you can feel good about your body. It's really easy to go to a restaurant and be distracted by all the like fun, delicious, creative meals that are on the menu. So when you are surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded and on the same journey and they can mirror back to you what it is that you are trying to walk towards, that's how you grow. And I love
Yeah. Yeah. And what about the people who just aren't in alignment anymore? Like the friendships that maybe you've had for a long time, or they're people who like maybe served a purpose in your growth at one point, but now you're getting to a position where you're like, I don't
it.
know. I see
Yeah.
myself going in this different way, and like this person doesn't necessarily align with that anymore.
Yeah. Those are tough. And I feel like there's a lot of that happening, at least in my life lately. And I feel like it could go in a myriad of different directions. And I think when you start to sense that something isn't necessarily in alignment anymore, I think we freak out a little bit, or at least I do,
Mm,
to where it's like, oh no, like, do I have to like break up with this person? And it feels so scary and dramatic and big. And I know for me, I've been surprised with some people who I thought we weren't going to continue to be friends, or maybe I was going in a different direction and we weren't necessarily growing together anymore. But that surprised me and kind of came along for the journey in a supportive way where just the friendship shifted in what it looked like, and they were able to come along and support, this woo woo journey that I'm on that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily think they would. I think, sometimes there's going to be cases where you are going in two different directions and then you just naturally kind of fade away. And then there are other ones where, it's just, they'll come along for the journey, or maybe you separate for a period of time and then you come back to each other. It just, I think it varies in all different relationships, but you need to just treat them intuitively as you're navigating through it, because people can surprise you. And I think that's my biggest
Yeah.
takeaway that I've learned through this is I've been surprised by people.
Yeah. And I do think if you like identify in your friend group as like the woo woo one or like the weird one, like sometimes it's easy to feel kind of alone in that, or to feel like your friends from childhood or from work or whatever just like won't get it. But
Yeah.
like you said, it's like I do think that there's so many people who are waking up to these things, or at least like interested in them. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I know even just with me, like with my corporate job, it's like I've met people through that space where, on the surface, everyone's like very buttoned up and very
Yeah.
like, this is professional me, right? But then it's like you'll notice a little thing, or like a tattoo someone has, or like, like something they post on Instagram or whatever. And then you're like, oh, like this person also, I think, is kind
You're
of
my
into this
people. I
stuff.
think you're my people.
And then you just kind of have to like subtly like hint at it. Like, I'm thinking of this girl who I knew from work, and I mentioned something about the new moon, and she's like, wait a second. Like, she's like, it's the new moon? I was like, yes. Like, what? And then we had this whole conversation about astrology, and it was great. But on the surface, I never would have like guessed that. And so I think
Yeah.
sometimes it is like, and it can also be a chance to kind of like maybe be that light for someone on their own journey too. So rather than
Yeah.
viewing it as like, I don't want to be weird, or I don't want to like put myself out there, it's like you never know, like that person might be kind of dancing around these things anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
then like you saying one thing, or you taking one action step that they look up to, like, oh, Gina just went to this breathwork class. Like, how cool. I'm going to start
Yeah.
looking into that. And I do think that's what's really cool to see, the ripple effect of like when you start following these little nudges and start,
Mm-hmm.
actually listening to your intuition, following your intuition, it starts to inspire other people around you too, which is really cool.
Totally. I relate to that so much because I was that person. So I wasn't always into the woo woo. I was, but like not like I am today. Like I've just along my journey ever since being a child was kind of into this stuff, but not to the degree in which I am today. And then I had a close friend who got really into it, and that kind of piqued my curiosity, and I kept getting more intrigued with the things that she was doing. And then now here we are today, and it's like basically my whole personality. So it's like you need those friendships that aren't full. Like if you have a Venn diagram, like you don't always need friends that are one for one with you. They just need to fit a couple
Yeah.
facets of who you are, because that is showing us like where we can expand into other things that we might not have known that we were into. So whether you're the non woo woo
Yeah.
friend who gets exposed to the woo woo stuff and you're like, oh, this is cool, or for something totally different. And I think that it's important to have friendships that are diverse, that fit the different facets of who you are. So like for me, I feel like I have different friends that I call for different things for what I enjoy doing. So like I have my concert going friends and my woo woo friends, and we're going to go hiking, who's my outdoorsy friend that's going to go do that kind of stuff with me. So it's important to know who you are and all the different facets of you, and then trying to fill those spaces with different friendships who can expand you into other things.
Yeah. Your sushi friends.
Yeah.
Sushi breathwork friends.
Totally.
That's funny. I forgot we went to sushi. I honestly did. I really thought we got coffee.
I think that was the original plan, and then it ended up being sushi, and then our second friend date was it aerial yoga? I think that was the second one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It
It
was.
it really was this like dating platonic kind of situation, which I
Yeah.
had never experienced before.
Well, and I think it's like important to touch on that because like you asked earlier, like how do you make friends as an adult? And I think it's, it is similar to dating because people do ask that too. Like, where do I meet people? Right? If it's not at
Yeah.
work, if it's not at the gym, like where else am I going to meet someone? And you do kind of have
Mhm.
to put yourself into these different situations. And, it's like I was in a point in my life at that point where I was really trying to step into the next version of myself. So I was like going to things like that. I was putting
Yeah.
myself in these different scenarios to try to meet different people. And then again, it's like, I do believe that that's your higher self, right? It's like this part of you that's just kind of like, hey, girl, like we're up, not that it's better or worse, but it's like we're going to be up here. This is where we're
Mm-hmm.
heading. Like
Yeah.
you need to start doing things differently if you want to get there. And so it's just these little tiny choices during your day that do kind of add up over the long run. But then it's like, I think just especially from a relationship standpoint, the people that I've met since then, including you and including some of the other friends in our group now, which has been cool to see our groups like come together too.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, I'm a different person now than I was just a year ago because of the people that I've met and brought into my space,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah. I feel like I said before, when we first met, I did not have the community that I have today, which was only just a year and a half ago. And a couple weeks before we met, I just had gotten back from doing a retreat out in California. So I drove 6 hours to go do a day retreat because I didn't feel like there were people here in Arizona that were gonna be into this stuff with me. I lived in Arizona
Mm-hmm.
my whole life, and those people were just not dropping into my world. And I drove all the way out there to do a day retreat because I was like, if that's what it takes to go put myself in a room with people who like what I like to talk about, then so be it. Let's do it. And on that retreat, it really just struck a chord with me that I was like, okay, like this lights me up so much. I need to find more of these people. I want to be in this world so much deeper. Like I feel so called to all of this. And like it's like something changed in me in that event. And I feel like energetically it allowed that portal to open for like 2 weeks
Hmm.
later for you to drop into that world with me. And so it was like through that event, I knew one, that I wanted more like minded community, and two, that I wanted to work in this space and have that be what my career was leading me towards. And so I think it was maybe after like the second or third time that we hung out, I got this intuitive download that we were going to start a podcast. And I didn't say anything to you. I just wrote it in my little notebook. And I think I alluded it to you, just saying, like, I feel like we're going to work together one day and like do something cool, but I didn't get specific because I wanted it to unfold naturally. And so the fact that, you know, a year ish into our relationship, you were like, hey, do you want to start a podcast? And I was like, I knew it. I knew this was coming.
So weird. I know. I remember that moment. Like, I remember you saying, I feel like we're going to work together. And I know you didn't say podcast. I
Yeah.
remember you saying it because at the time I was really unsure of what I wanted to do and if I wanted to start my coaching business again. And I was like, I'm not sure. Like, this girl might be crazy. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And then, yeah, like things just have kind of like steadily progressed. And then one day I just like texted you out of the blue and I was like, okay, so I have this idea. Do you want to start a podcast? And no joke for those of you listening, like I saw the little three dots typing back and I was like really afraid that Gina would be like, no, like you're insane. But no, you were like, yes. And I literally thought about this when we first met and I wrote it down and I was like, that's the weirdest thing, but I believe it because you're so like your intuition is so strong. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, I trust your intuition more than mine sometimes.
I love
I'm
that.
like, well, if yours said, then yes, for sure. Then that's the thing.
I love that. Like what we were talking about earlier, how like I trusted my intuition to go to that event and then I got the friendship out of it. I mean, now
Mm-hmm.
it's like the fruit of where my intuition was leading me that point is still unfolding because not only did I get a
Right.
friendship out of it, but now we're starting a podcast and like, I don't know, it'd be pretty
Right.
sweet if this took off and went somewhere and we can
Yeah.
change some lives. So it's like that's
Yeah.
the beauty of intuition and following it because it will lead people and opportunities into your life that you can't plan for. And somebody who was the ultimate planner for most of her life, it's wild to live on the other side of the coin and be like, you can just let things happen and it's okay. We're all still fine.
Yeah, you're telling me story of my life. Yeah, it's like this cool ripple effect when you see it start to actually take place. It's very awesome.
Yeah. And you don't get to see it until it's in hindsight. And then you look back and you're like, whoa, look at that. Look at
Yeah.
how those pieces came together.
Yeah. Well, I know you'd mentioned like going back a little bit, you were talking about the fact that you went all the way to California because you were like, there's no one here for me, right? I'm going to go do this thing. I think that's important because I do feel like we get stuck in that mindset a lot of like, I just have, the same day to day. I'm in the same routine. I'm going to the same places. I know the same people. There's nobody else here for me to meet, which is
Yeah.
obviously such a limiting belief, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and cannot be true. That you do not know everybody as much as you think you
Yeah.
do. It's impossible.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I think that's something just to like notice in your own self, like what your beliefs are around meeting new people and around friendships
Yeah.
in general, right? Because it's like, I think it's really easy to get stuck into that mindset of like, well, these are just my
Oh, yeah.
friends and this is who I know and this is just the way I am, this is the way my life is, versus having more of that like growth mindset around, there's always more people to meet. There are like limitless people out there. And continuing to expand and continuing to grow. And it doesn't mean that you have to go travel like across state lines or,
Yeah.
book a huge trip or something. Like you can, that's amazing. But it also could be as simple as like, if you're at the grocery store and you literally just like smile at someone, like it doesn't need to be this whole big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, that is like the crux of manifestation, right? It's figuring out what your beliefs are. And when you can tweak those limiting beliefs and get beyond them, okay, great. So now we know that we have this limiting belief that says there's nobody here for me to be friends with that likes the things
Mm-hmm.
that I like. Okay, so when we can identify that and get ahead of that, now how can we take action against that to prove ourselves wrong and get curious? Okay, like what's
Yeah.
something new that I can go and try that I haven't tried before, or just whatever it is that you're being pulled towards, like, oh, this breathwork thing sounds fun, I'm going to go try it even though I don't know anyone who can come with me. It's like when you take that action, you open the door for new opportunities to come in, because in addition to your beliefs that you have, if you're still staying in that, you can change your belief and then sit in your house and be like, okay, well, I changed my belief,
Right.
but you have to like take the action to change it. And when you put those two
Right.
together, that's when you allow the universe to co-create with you, to be like, boop, here's a new friend and business partner.
Yeah. I love it. I know
Yeah.
I used to get really hung up on that part with manifesting. It's like, okay, cool. So you just say like affirmations all day?
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that it? I don't get it.
Yeah, right. So I just write it down 90 times and then it'll just like
Yeah.
pop into my life. No,
Yeah.
there's a little more to it. And we're going to be teaching you all about those things here on the
I
podcast.
know. I know. I'm so excited. Yeah. I think that, I feel like truthfully, there are so many people out there who are just like us and just like you,
Yeah.
who are, kind of in this space of like really leaning into these things and really leaning into growth and really leaning into being more open and just like this expansiveness. And
Yeah.
I've noticed it, I mean, just for us personally, like our group and our network here in the Phoenix area just in the last year, how it's exponentially grown. I think we're living in a really cool time where we
Oh,
have
yeah.
so many different resources and access to so much, right?
The
Um,
veil is lifting.
yes, exactly. Exactly. And I just feel like it's very exciting, and it can also feel intimidating, especially if you are like introverted, as you mentioned. Like I'm like such a happy balance between the two where I do find I'm more extroverted when I'm around people, but then I need that time to like recharge, right? And to
Yes.
like come back to myself. And I feel like, and that could be a whole other topic that we get into down the road, right? Of like how to energetically take care of yourself when it comes to friendships and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Whole different thing.
Oh, yes. That's a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, with what we're doing here and really our intention for this space is like all levels welcome. Like you could
Mm-hmm.
not even know anything about manifestation, anything like that. You could have been doing this stuff for 15 years, right? And I think the cool thing is that we all have something to teach each other, and that's something that we've been
Absolutely.
talking about a lot too, just with our businesses and with how we want to help people, and knowing that everybody in our group has such different areas of expertise and different things that they're naturally so lit up by, and how cool it is that we can all like easily come together as a community and share those parts of ourselves with the world, right? And in doing that help support other people to get the inspiration and the courage to like do that themselves. So I think that's a really powerful part of this is like the fact that we do have access to all of these people who have all of these different strengths, and
Yep.
we're creating a space where that can really come forward in a very like safe, supportive, non-judgmental way.
Yeah. Like, how can we share each other's gifts in this community together? And then how can we bring people in to expose them to all of these different modalities that they could be a part of to help them on their
Mm-hmm.
journey back home to themselves? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited for where this is all going to go and what we're creating and how it's going to be received by everyone. So, welcome to our community, dear higher self. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're getting this point across, but we don't just want to have this podcast and just talk at you in every episode. So, we are creating a space to go with the podcast where you can be in community with us and talk back with us and engage. So, after each episode, join us over in our community. It's dearhigherself.me, and we'll have different discussions for each of the episodes where you can ask questions and have access to additional resources that we're going to create, guided meditations, journal prompts, different resources to go further on the topics that we're covering, and a place where you can meet other like-minded women who are on this journey with you. So join us over at dearhigherself.me to be a part of the community and join us there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get alerted every time we have a new episode, and you can follow along with us. But we are excited.
Yay! Thank you so much for joining.
Yep.
Woohoo!
We'll see you in the next one. Bye.